The advent of civil war in Sudan almost 30 years ago created refugees out of thousands of children escaping genocide or recruitment into child armies. Known as the Lost Boys of Sudan, many made new lives for themselves here in Australia. But as Rebecca Bryce reports, the creation of a new southern Sudanese state last year has prompted one former lost boy to go home.
I hope I have 30 kilos.
David Jock is no stranger to long-distance travel. But for the most part it's been without the luxury of luggage. 3 times the Sudanese Christian has had to run for his life because of war. The first when he was just 9 years old.
When the massacre or what happened in Nasir, those years when the boy was told to leave the village and go to the bush by our parents so that we should go and look for a sanctuary.
I believe I've survived for a reason to tell my story, to touch lives.
He was alone but not without company. David Jock became one of the lost boys of Sudan. UNICEF estimates 20,000 children, mostly boys, left their homes and families when civil war meant they were at risk of being killed or forced into battle as child soldiers.
I first met David in about 2003. I think he was around early 20s, about 22.
And his mother is called Nyaradejo Kerjo.
Peter Eckerman has been a father figure and friend to David Jock since he came to Australia.
As we spent time together, I learnt quite a lot about his story and what an epic life he'd had. I was blown away, I think, to hear that these stories had happened in our lifetime.
Those stories are grim, but help explain the strength and faith of a man who's since made a new life in Adelaide as a youth worker, community leader and father. David Jock fled Sudan to neighbouring Ethiopia, but when war broke out there too, there was no choice but to return home.
That journey was really, there was a fighting, and then at the back there was a rebel who tried to capture Ethiopian, and then at the front of us there's a northern regime who tried to bombard the refugee who left the Ethiopia, and then again there's a river that some of us they don't know how to swim.
Many died, but for those who made it back, Sudan still wasn't safe. So the children set off on foot for Kenya and the Kakuma refugee camp, hundreds of kilometres south. Again, many didn't make it, murdered in the fighting, starved to death or attacked by wild animals. As one of the lucky ones, David Jock made Kakuma his home for 11 years. His mother made it to Kakuma too, but didn't survive. David Jock came to Australia with his 2 younger brothers and became their carer. Last July, things changed. South Sudan declared independence to the delight of many former citizens around the world. The ABC ran a story of the Adelaide celebrations. It had unexpected consequences for David Jock and his family.
That story was circulated throughout the Sudanese community, and some people over in the eastern states said, "Oh, there is David Jock Nial. His father is alive in Malakal. We should tell him." Of course, that happened.
In December, David Jock bid his wife and children farewell and set out to rediscover the people and places of his past.
When I go back to the village, I think those boys' memory will come back, because we took a journey together, and some of them they are not with me today from the same village, and I think that will also affect me a little bit, because I will be thinking about them. We're now in the airport, we're about to leave Adelaide.
It was not a journey David Jock made alone. He was joined by his brother and armed with a camera, which they used to document their experience. 4 plane trips and 48 hours later, they arrived. But for David, there was a sad realisation. He no longer recognised his country, nor it him, it seems.
One of my relatives went and picked me up from the Juba airport, and then he has to get somebody else to show him who I am. And then that's one thing make me, I'm really a lost person among my family.
Over dusty roads in a ute that had seen better days, they headed to their father's village, Malakal.
That's probably 25 years or so that you...
22 years.
22 years you hadn't seen him.
Now that is a part of blessing. I have to put my hand like this. He has to pour the saliva, and he has to, and then I cry now.
Oh,
so it's making me.
David Jock had feared he may never see his father alive again.
But looking at his eye, and then it make me that, this is my dad, and then I start crying, and his children and his grandchildren are surrounding us, and I would just feel more comfortable. This is my dad. This is a person that I missed for the last 22 years.
His father spoke of pride at meeting his grown son, and surrounded by dozens of family, they celebrated with goat for dinner. Soon it was time to leave for Nasser, the village David Jock once called home. There was a warm welcome, a blessing with precious water, and this time a cow waiting to be dispatched for dinner. Being back in his village brought back memories of other lost boys who would never be found.
All the memory came back to me about those of boys in my village that we moved together, that we lived Nasser at the same day, and some of them, they did not make it back to the village.
David Jock is a lost boy who did make it back, and that's a reason for joy. Back in Adelaide, David Jock uses his experiences to help refugee boys with similar backgrounds. He wants to teach them to leave the violence behind without forgetting where they came from. To his friend, that's something he's managed to achieve.
He's still much the same, but I think there's a sense that he has been home and found a little bit more of his own, where he comes from, his own sense of place. So he's an Australian, but he's also he's a South Sudanese man.
Follow me.
A South Sudanese man who hopes for peace in his homeland.
And I was just telling them, it is up to you to make this city to be a better place, and all people will love this country.
Sounds like very good advice.
Yeah.